I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about the reinforcing structure, which, along with the balancing structure, which I'll talk about in another video, are the only two structures that you will ever find in a relationship model, no matter how apparently complicated or complex that relationship model is. It's made up of some number of reinforcing and balancing structures. So let's go ahead and get started. And I've presented this in relationship structures on numerous occasions, and I've always presented the relationships first and then talked about context. And I'd like to try to do it this time from the context first and then talk about the relationships in a bit more detail. So I want to talk about the reinforcing structure from the basis of a savings account. A savings account is a place, a savings account, retirement account, some kind of an account where you put money, and periodically that money generates interest. Now, this relationship here says that if you increase the savings account, the amount of money in the savings account, it increases the interest. And if you decrease the amount of money in the savings account, it decreases the interest. And the double bar on this relationship is meant to indicate that there's some delay in when this happens. I mean, interest is typically calculated monthly or quarterly, or in some time period. It's not continuously calculated. So, and then once the interest is calculated, it's actually added to the savings account. Now, notice that I've said that interest changes in the same direction as the savings account, but the interest adds to the savings account. These two entities in this relationship are actually different kinds of things. The savings account is a quantity of something that accumulates over time. And if time stopped, whatever money was there would still be there. Whereas interest is something that's calculated, it's simply a variable. And once it's calculated, it adds to the savings account. So it's really only there for the moment that it's calculated, and then it ends up being somewhere else. So this particular structure, which is called a reinforcing structure, where something creates a result which promotes more of the same activity that created it. So it simply goes round in circle, and it has a character of growth. Now, you can't, in any one of these two elements alone, you don't find the characteristic of growth, but when the two of them interact on an ongoing basis, you end up with actually exponential growth. And we typically label a structure with the name of what it is that's growing, and we label it R1. So if there were multiple reinforcing structures in a relationship model, we could tell which order to think about them. And that will become clearer in a future video when I actually talk about how we go about developing relationship models of situations. So here, the savings account, interest changes in the same direction, and then the interest then adds to the savings account because the savings account is a quantity of something that accumulates over time. Typically, we call them stocks. Now, additionally, there are some other things that are relevant here in that the interest doesn't come from nothing. It's a combination of the amount of money in the savings account and the interest rate, which is used to calculate the interest. So if the interest rate increases, the amount of interest calculated would increase, and if the interest rate decreases, the interest would decrease. Now, in this particular set of relationships, interest rate is considered to be a constant, though you know that if we're looking at this relationship over a period of 20 years, the interest rate is going to vary over time, though the interest rate still isn't something that accumulates. It's just a value that changes based upon some other things. then the savings account is not going to generate any interest unless at some point in time someone makes a deposit in it, and you could make periodic deposits to actually increase the amount in the savings account, which would then increase the interest, increasing the amount of money in the savings account. So the relationship between deposit and savings account is the same kind of relationship where you increase the deposit, you increase the amount of money in the savings account. Also, one could think about withdrawals from the savings account, and this relationship says it subtracts from the savings account because this is a quantity of something that grows or declines over time, and withdrawals would cause it to decline, which is why this actually has a negative sign on it as opposed to a positive sign. The extent to which you elaborate the model depends upon what it is that you're trying to understand. So that deposit could connect to a whole bunch of other things, and withdrawal could relate to another other things. In interest rate, what causes it to increase and decrease over time could also be part of the relationship model. It depends on what it is, the extent of what it is that you're trying to understand. And in this instance, I'm simply trying to understand the relationship that causes a reinforcing structure and produces exponential growth. So in this video, what I tried to talk about was the nature of an influencing element and the influenced element, when that relationship can have two different meanings depending upon the character of the influenced element. If it's a stock, the plus sign means it adds to, and if it's not a stock, if it's a variable, then it means that the influenced element changes in the same direction as the influencing element. The other relationship is a minus not actually being negative, just meaning that the influencing element subtracts from the influenced element if it's a stock. Otherwise, it says that the influenced element changes in the opposite direction of the influencing element. So if the influencing element increases, the influenced element decreases. And if the influencing element decreases, the influenced element increases. These are the only two relationships that we employ, and we use them to create two basic structures, the other one being, as I said, the balancing structure, which I'll talk about in another video. And those two structures are used to create all of the relationship models that we use to help us better understand why things are the way they are and how to deal with them. So hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you in another video shortly. Bye.